She was always the one who stayed, the one who listened, the one who understood, the one who held everything together when the world around her was falling apart. She thought loyalty meant carrying the weight of everyone else, even when her own shoulders were trembling. But she didn't know that loyalty without balance slowly turns into a quiet kind of loneliness. She dedicated years standing beside people in their darkest moments. No matter how tired she was, she showed up. She stayed on late-night calls, dried tears that were not her own, and healed wounds she didn't cause. She believed that being there for others was the highest form of love. But she didn't notice how often she was left standing alone once the storm passed. People returned to their lives, lighter than before, forgetting the hands that held them upright. They only remembered her when life grew heavy again. Her presence became a convenience, not a treasure. She didn't see it at first. She mistook being needed for being valued, and she spent years confusing the two. Her partner was the same. He expected her to be his anchor, his healer, his constant comfort. He leaned on her until she could no longer tell where his weight ended and her own began. Yet when she needed someone to lean on, his support disappeared into silence. She convinced herself he was just stressed, just busy, just tired. She repeated excuses like mantras, hoping one day they would feel true. She ignored the ache inside her that whispered, "You're standing alone." Her best friend relied on her in a similar way. Every crisis was an emergency. Every heartbreak required her attention. Every frustration became her responsibility. But when she finally gathered the courage to talk about her own struggles, her friend changed the subject. Again and again. One evening, she sat on the floor of her room, hugging a pillow as tears filled her eyes. She had spent the entire day supporting others. Yet no one had asked how she was doing. Not once. The realization broke her in a quiet, devastating way. She looked at her phone. Dozens of messages, all asking for something, none offering anything in return. The feeling of being surrounded yet completely alone sank deep into her chest like a cold stone. She whispered to herself, "Why am I the only one staying?" The question echoed in the stillness of her room. For the first time, she heard her own pain clearly without drowning it in excuses. The next morning, she woke up with a heavy heart. But as she sat at the edge of her bed, she made a small but powerful decision. She would observe, not respond, not chase, not fix, just observe who showed up when she didn't. It was the beginning of her awakening. She stopped sending the first message. She stopped checking on people who never checked on her. She stopped being the emergency exit for those who never stayed to see her pain. She simply stepped back. The silence that followed was louder than she expected. Her partner didn't notice the distance. He lived comfortably in the presence she created for him. When she didn't ask about his day, he didn't ask about hers. When she didn't initiate conversation, the day ended quietly without a single meaningful word exchanged. Her best friend didn't reach out either. Days passed, then a week, nothing. The girl who once relied on her every day didn't notice her absence. Or maybe she did, but chose not to care. She realized then how deeply she had overestimated her place in their lives. She walked through the park one afternoon, feeling strangely hollow yet strangely clear. For years, she had stood by others like a rooted tree, steady, dependable, unshakable. But no one had been her shelter. No one had stood by her with the same strength. She sat on a bench and let the sunlight touch her face. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to feel everything she had buried. The hurt, the exhaustion, the quiet longing to be held the way she held others. For the first time, she didn't fight the ache. She let it wash over her like a tide she had always resisted. And in that acceptance, she felt something shift inside her. That evening, she turned off her phone and made herself dinner slowly, calmly, just for her. No rushing, no guilt, no multitasking. It felt strange at first, caring for herself without an audience. But the simplicity was comforting. As days passed, she became more protective of her space. She said no more often. She responded later, or not at all. She stopped explaining her boundaries, stopped apologizing for choosing herself, stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. Of course, some people didn't like the change. Her partner accused her of being selfish. He didn't understand why she no longer carried him emotionally. But she didn't feel guilty this time. She had finally learned that being a partner didn't mean being someone's emotional dumpster. Her best friend resurfaced only when she needed help again. "Where have you been?" she asked, not with concern, but with entitlement. When she replied, "I've been taking care of myself," the silence that followed said everything. The distance she created didn't destroy her relationships, it revealed them. A few people disappeared completely. No effort, no message, no checking in. She realized they were tied to her usefulness, not to her heart. Their absence didn't wound her, it liberated her. But she also found people who surprised her, soft souls who noticed her quietness. New friends who asked real questions. Kind strangers who offered comfort without expecting anything in return. They weren't many, but they were enough to remind her she deserved gentle company. One evening, she sat by her window with a cup of tea, watching the sky change colors. She thought about all the years she spent standing beside people who wouldn't have stayed if she needed them. She felt sorrow, but not regret. Every moment had taught her something. She whispered to herself, I deserved better. I still do. As weeks turned into months, she rebuilt herself gently. She learned to trust again not others, but her own heart. She learned that love meant balance, not sacrifice. She learned that loyalty meant supporting each other, not one person holding everything alone. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some days she missed the comfort of old habits. Some days she felt lonely, but now she understood that loneliness was better than being surrounded by the wrong people. One afternoon, someone new entered her life. Someone observant, someone who listened. They didn't rush her healing. They didn't demand her energy. They simply stood beside her, quietly. It felt unfamiliar, safe, real. For the first time, she wasn't standing alone. She realized then that love was never supposed to be one-sided, and the people meant for her would never let her carry everything alone. They would stand by her just as firmly as she once stood by everyone else. And in that moment, she finally understood. She wasn't hard to love. She had just been loving the wrong people.